Day. Hope you are having a great week so far. We are honored to have you guys join us here on this episode. This is week 3 of the implementation coaching for those of you guys that have gone through our Note Buying for Dummies workshop. We held our last workshop in December. Some of you guys attended that. Some of you guys have attended the past. Our next live workshop is going to be March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd here in Austin, Texas. So mark your calendars for that. Like I said, March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. You can register by going to notebuyingfordummies.com. If you're a WCN crew member or a previous coaching student, just let me know. You've got a special thing. If you're a past coaching student, you come for free. If you're a WCN crew member, there is a reduced cost for you as well for you. But we'll be glad to have you guys. It's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday here in Austin, Texas, and I'd love for you to join us there. But if you are are looking to get rock and roll, let's discuss a little bit of what we covered the past 2 weeks before we dive into today's information for you. All right. Week 1, we talked about the ways to find deals. We broke down some of the different ways that we're finding deals that nobody else is finding, how to get these deals sent to you, and how to leverage LinkedIn and other lists to find deals. Last week, week 2, we discussed about raising capital, some of the different ways that we raise capital, the things you need to have in place, like your pitch deck, your executive summary, and the marketing facet behind that. And I got to give a shout out to a couple of students this past week have raised a couple $100,000. John Gore's raised about $200,000. He's pretty excited about that. And I think Cal's raised about another 200 to 250 as well. So kudos to you two guys for doing a great job following through along with the implementation. And big shout out to Antron and Fulton also, who are doing some great job in getting their stuff up, rocking and rolling. So you probably hopefully hear from those guys and gals all before the next couple of weeks are up. Might have one of them join us on here tonight. But anyway, today I want to dive in what you should be looking to buy. And while there's a lot of product out there in different facets of what you can buy, I want to go through what you really want to spend your time on and what you don't want to waste your time with. Okay. And then we'll dive into the due diligence and how to slice and dice a tape. When you get a tape in from an asset manager, what do you look at? What do you spend your time on? What do you not waste your time on? Okay. And I am monitoring the chat roll. So if you're, I guess it does help if I actually enable it so you guys can actually chat with me so that you're able to ask questions there. And I am monitoring on YouTube live stream as well. So feel free to give me a thumbs up or a hello on YouTube as well so we know that you're live on there. Like I said, ask your questions. There are no dumb questions. I will ask you to keep your questions to relevant information. You can always go back to our YouTube channel at weekclosenotes.tv. If you're watching that, make sure you're subscribed to that and watch the last 2 episodes, week 1, week 2. We also live streamed week 1, week 2 back to back this past Sunday. So you can watch the roughly 2.5 hours of that training back to back on our YouTube channel as well. But anyway, and then of course we turn these into a podcast episode as well. So if you're listening to this podcast episode, you can click on the link in the description to actually go back and actually watch the live video. All right. So let's talk about what's coming out and what you're seeing. Well, first and foremost, there's things that are coming out that you can take a look at. I mean, the more tapes, the more lists you get, the more familiar you're going to build and the more educated you're going to get in understanding what you're looking at. All right. So every tape does have value. Okay. But the tapes that you're not going to bid on, you're just going to kind of say, I'm not interested, are basically, they're either going to be pure performing tapes where they've never defaulted. The banks want to sell those at par. There's no room to make money if they're selling at par. Okay. And that's very common. A portfolio of performing notes, you've got to have cheap money to buy that stuff at, like at a 1% money cost. And if they're making 2, 3, 4, 5, that's how you make your money, is the difference between the spread. Well, most of you guys aren't going to have a couple $1,000,000 to handle it. And that's okay. You can strive to get that later on. So tapes of performing notes you're not going to buy. The second tape that you're not going to waste your time in is what's called scratch and dent loans. And these are loans that a bank or lender has originated, and there is something wrong, not anything huge, but something wrong with the collateral. And by the collateral, I mean the loan documents. Maybe there's missing documentation. Maybe there's missing signatures and a notary stamp. When the loan was originated, maybe the borrower was not Dodd-Frank compliant, or the loans that makes the loan not Dodd-Frank compliant because the borrower didn't go through a registered mortgage loan originator to make sure that they were, able to afford it. It could also be that when the loan was originated, it was going to be sold to like a Wells Fargo or a Bank of America, but the borrower's credit may have changed at closing. They may have a high DTI. The appraisal came back. There's a whole lot of things that can affect the scratch and dent loan. Doesn't mean it's a bad loan. It just means that you're probably not going to buy it because scratch and dent loans are still selling in the mid 90s of the unpaid balance. And once again, unless you got really, really cheap money, it doesn't make any sense to buy that stuff. So while it's great to look at this stuff, unless they're going willing to take a big discount, you're really not going to buy either of those two things. So that's the first thing you don't want to waste your time with, okay? Third type of stuff that you're going to get in is going to be a mixture probably of reperforming loans, stuff that was once non-performing, whether it's non-performing in 12 months and the borrower started back on track in the last 12 months of some sort of payment. They paid 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever. Or stuff that's non-performing, or stuff that is the borrower is 60, 90 days late. Now, on a non-performing note, I don't look at anything that's really less than 6 months in default. Okay. The reason for that is the seller is not going to take as big a discount. I mean, if the borrower is only 30 days late, they're probably not going to take that big a discount if it's been, performing the entire time and just started to be late. Okay. If it gets beyond 6 months, they're going to start taking a bit of a discount to get it moved off their books. Now, that's the first thing you look at. Look at your last paid date and look at the payment history. A couple of things on the spreadsheet you're going to see is the most recent payments and last paid date. Or next, I'm sorry, let me rephrase that. Last paid date and next due. So if a borrower has been like 6 behind, but they made a payment in January, but next due shows July, that tells you they're still 6 months behind. Okay. So those are stuff that you would buy. Stuff that's 6 months late, stuff that's greater than 90 days late. That would definitely be stuff that you'll buy. That's truly non-performing stuff. Now, when it comes to the non-performing or stuff that's reperforming, borrowers back on track, sellers are selling it at 70, 80 cents a dollar. That's a price that kind of makes sense for the performance stuff. All right. Other stuff you'll see like contract for deeds. I treat contract for deeds like a first lien. They're usually lower balance loans on lower balance properties. And I'll talk about the balance and values of properties in a minute as we go through things, okay? But when you're getting in tapes, yeah, I will look at reperforming. I'll look at non-performing. And then, those are the two biggest. I look at contract for deed tapes all day long. Now, somebody asked me the other day, well, I look at a foreclosure list or an REO list, real estate owned list. And I'll glance at it briefly. If the lender has a list of REOs or investors taking some property back and they haven't sold it yet, yeah, I'll take a look at it. But you got to be very careful. Here's the thing about REOs. Most of the time, if I'm an investor, like I'll give you, this is a great example. Jessica is watching here now. Jessica was looking at a tape from a company out in Arizona. It had a property in it, a non-performing note in Spring, Texas. Now, Spring, Texas, hey, that's just on the north side of Houston. Not a bad thing. The online value showed one thing. The photos that you could see from Zillow looked like it was okay. And I was like, why are they selling this note so cheap in a lot of cases? So I drove out. I was on my way to go look at another property. And he says, well, I'll drive by this one for you. So I drive by that asset. And from the front, it looks like it's occupied. Well, I walk around the side of the house. I can see that Jumanji's in the backyard. Back door is wide open. And what do I find inside? Ass. Just straight up nastiness. Okay. And it was being sold. Rats, exactly. Worst rat infestation we'd seen. Rat crap everywhere. It was a shitty house. Pardon my French, but it was crap, roaches, trash everywhere. It was demolished, basically. Well, I told the seller that. I actually did a walkthrough video. You can actually go to my YouTube channel and watch the walkthrough video of that property. And I sent it over to the seller, and they're like, "Oh, thank you very much." I was like, "Yeah, the bid that we've offered, we're withdrawing the bid. Your bid shouldn't be 200, maybe 50K for what the value would be after clean out in a lot of cases." Well, the seller is still trying to sell it. He's trying to sell it as an REO, hoping that somebody doesn't pay attention to him. I'm like, you can't do that. You got to realize the sooner you come to the understanding that you have to disclose this stuff, it just makes it. Now, here's the thing. I know the seller. I know the seller very personally. And when I see an REO on his list, it tells me, A, it needs a lot of work. B, it's not a deal in a lot of cases. Because any of us, if like I'm going to foreclose, Jessica, Catherine, Larry, everybody, if we're going to take an asset back and foreclose on it, And if it's in decent condition, decent meaning paint, carpet, a little clean out, stuff like that, we're going to proceed with it. We're not going to list it for sale because that's extra equity or value now that we can take back now, right? That's now profit to us. Now, if it's in a rough area, needs a lot of work, then we'll sell it for somebody, let somebody else locally take care of it. So that's why I don't really focus on a lot of REOs. I look at stuff in Texas, I look at stuff in Florida for the most part, but most of the time I don't want to get into the property management aspect of doing that. Does that make sense, everybody? Hopefully you understand it. You want to keep it simple, okay? You don't want to be doing rehabs all across the country. I got a rehab right now that I'm working through that's dragging on and dragging. Now the winter's here, it's dragging on even longer, okay? But it is what it is. We're working through it. We're still going to make money on it. Still going to be a good day. It just takes a little bit longer for that aspect of things. And I'm in the note business, not in the real estate business, okay? So those are some things you want to keep in mind and really underline more so. There's really one law that comes down to bidding on notes, or really bidding on real estate as a whole as itself. Now, somebody would say, well, is that location? Well, that could be, yes. Everything has good location. Every city has good parts. Every city has bad parts. A few cities I won't buy in. Chicago, just as a rough area to foreclose. Chirac, Crook County, I don't like that area. I don't buy in New York, New Jersey. I don't buy in the West Coast states, Washington State, Oregon, or California, just because it's kind of crazy there. It's not friendly. I don't buy in New York or New Jersey because of the long foreclosure time frame. I don't buy in Louisville because of the bond they want you to have on there. But most of the rest of the states are A-OK, all right? If you hire a local servicing company, servicing that's licensed in that state, and if you need to foreclose, you've got an attorney that's licensed in the state, ask those folks, what's it going to take to foreclose? What's the cost? And what's the time frame? And go from there, okay? But the underlying number one rule isn't location. The number one underlying rule when it comes to any type of real estate investing, and primarily in notes, is never buy something you don't want to end up owning. Never buy something you don't want to end up taking back. All right? And I'm serious. Never buy a note on a property you don't want to end up taking back. So it might be the greatest deal. Might be getting the best return on this property, but if it's in the middle of a crack alley, or it's the smallest property on the block, like it's 800 square foot house, or it might be out in the edge of town with nobody else around, except maybe Dexter, the serial killer, living in it. Okay. It's not a deal. Okay. You got to run the deals. I'll give you another example here. I won't say client. It was another investor that reached out to me. He's like, hey, I'm getting ready to buy this note in LaGrange, Texas. Now, you guys know where LaGrange, Texas is. It's east of Austin by an hour. ZZ Top made it famous a few years back, obviously, in their song. And LaGrange is not a bad little city. It's great. It's your typical kind of mid-sized, small Texas town. I mean, Texas is it's exciting. You can foreclose in a year. I mean, less than a year, really, like 30 days, right? And I had this guy come to me. He's like, hey, Scott, I'm really excited about this note deal. And I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Tell me about it. He goes, well, it's in LaGrange, Texas. I'm like, okay. I go, tell me the numbers on it. He goes, well, it's worth about $90K. I'm going to pick it up for around $30K. I'm like, okay, that's not so bad. You're buying it for 33 cents on the dollar. Is it occupied? Needs some work? It needs some work. I said, well, how much does it need? Well, it needs about 35K in work. I'm like, okay, all right. And I said, okay, that's still not too bad. You're buying it for 30. It needs at least 30K in repairs because it needs outdating, paint, carpet, and some other stuff. It's worth 90. So you're sitting at 60, basically 67 cents on the dollar, right? 60 divided by 90, that's where we got that. So you're buying it at 67 cents down on the dollar. Okay, great. I mean, they owed a little bit more than 90, so it was underwater a little bit. So he's basically truly buying it at like 60 cents of owed, and it was like 67 cents of value. I'm like, okay, who's going to finance? He goes, well, I got a hard money lender who's going to finance me at 12%. I'm like, okay, you're kind of getting skinnier now. I go, what are the days on market? And he's like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, what is the days on market? Have you talked to a realtor to get your comps? He was like, yeah, a realtor says it's worth about 90, maybe 90 to 100. Okay, but what are the days on market? This is one of the things that always, he's like, I don't know. I'll have to check. When he came back, oh, it's a year. I'm like, then it's not a deal. He goes, what do you mean? I'm getting it 66 cents on the dollar. I'm like, I don't remember what his name was. I was going to say his name was Gene, but it wasn't. But anyway, we'll just call his name Gene. I go, Gene, if that property It's going to take you, let's go through the time frame here. You're buying it at 30. You got to put 60 into it. There's probably another grand in foreclosure costs and servicing. All right, now you're at 61. All right. And it's hopefully at 90K. Your hope it's going to stay at 90K, but it takes a year to sell. Now, if you list it at 90 and it takes a year to sell, what are you going to do to move it faster? Because you're going to, if you have hard money loan on this stuff, that's at 12% plus 2 points. So 12% on his $60,000 investment, $7,200 plus 2 points. That's another $1,200. So that's, we'll just say 8,500, right? So now, if everything goes right and it sells in a year, you're sitting at $70,000 in costs on potentially a $90,000 sales price. He's like, yeah, that's still good 20 grand. I'm like, no, it's not. Because if you take realtor commissions out and closing costs, that's 10% of your 90. Now you're at 81. Now you're making less than 10, really rough about 10 grand. He's like, oh, I didn't run the numbers through for that. I was like, do you know any back? Oh, yeah, there's a couple years in back taxes. He's like, I think 5 grand. I said, well, now you're at 6 grand. Now you're at a skinny deal. So some of the things I want you to take away from that, ladies and gentlemen, never buy something you don't want to own. Okay. Make sure you know your numbers. Okay. And know the days on market. In today's world, we can all agree what? Well, days on market have increased, right? It used to be anything that didn't sell in 2 weeks on the MLS was basically junk, right? Even junk was selling faster than 30 days. Okay. If you're seeing in market where it's taking a year to sell something, you got to understand, you got to price that puppy to move. You're not going to get full value. You got to do a 30, 60, 90-day quick sell price, which is mean you're going to be dropping the sales price 10, 20, 30% in some cases. You got to make sure it's an ideal asset. You've basically got to rehab the property up to be the best looking one on the MLS. And you've also got to make sure it's a cookie cutter house or a cookie cutter property that people are looking to buy. 3-2, 3-1, 2-2, you know, that kind of stuff. If you get to where it's a smaller house or it's got a funky setup to it, that's not going to work well in your favor when most comps are being pulled just off the square footage. You know what I mean, ladies and gentlemen? So that's the thing, is never buy something you don't want to end up owning. Is one of the most underlying deals I can tell you when it comes to. Now, I've bought lower valued assets. I bought stuff cheap that I didn't mind owning because it was decent looking assets. I knew I could hold on to it for a while. And if by worst case I had to rent it out, it would do good. But I've stayed to that at least 3-1 or 2-2s. I don't usually do like a 2-1 unless it's in a highly densely populated area where I know I can move those pretty fast, or more so 2-1s are decent little rental properties. I'll look at condos all day long in Florida, definitely, where there's safe harbor rules and stuff like that. I'll look occasionally here in Texas and stuff like that too. But that's the biggest thing. Don't buy something that you don't want to end up owning. Just because the numbers on your spreadsheet are looking good based on the calculation of your yields and running your numbers, and we'll get to more of that later on. But that's the thing to look at. Now, as we dive into your spreadsheet, there's things that you want to start slicing and dicing. And by slicing and dicing being a note samurai, I mean by stuff that you just want to remove, get off your list. Literally take off, delete, get rid of them. It's just not worth it. Okay. Now, first and foremost, we already mentioned some of the states. New York, New Jersey, I get rid of them most of the time. Washington State, Oregon, California, I'll pretty much get rid of them anyway. I may send them out to a few investors that live in those neck of the woods that I know are buying. It all depends on what the price point is. And that takes us to the number 2 question you've got to ask for due diligence before you even dive into it. What the hell do you want for this? What price point? What's the sales price? Give me some sort of color or breakdown on what type of discount or price point you're looking for. If you want 90 cents or 95 cents on the dollar for non-performing, never mind, it's not worth waiting. If you want par, it's not worth wasting my time. I'll move on. If you're going to give me some sort of discount, if it's non-performing, I can make a discount offer to it, great. But I don't want to waste my time. I don't want to waste your time. So that's important. What's the price point? Because I'm going to ask you that. I get people all the time. I got a deal. Well, what makes it a deal? Is it a dud or a deal? Well, I don't know. What's the price point? Well, they didn't tell me. Well, you got to ask. You got to get some sort of pricing specification so you know how to run your numbers, how to figure yield, how to figure your rate of return. Those kind of things are very, very important. Okay. So while we talk about, never buy anything you want to end up on, you also got to know the bid price roughly where they want you to be. If they come and say highest and best, okay, that's fine. as long as it's not par. I had some bank tell me the other day, oh, it's non-performing. We're selling everything, all our non-performing at par. I'm like, well, that's good. Doesn't mean I'm going to bid on it. It's just I've got money costs and I can't make any money that way. So you're going to end up owning that for a while. Okay. So we start getting rid of assets based on the spreadsheets. Now, the first thing, the easiest thing to do is go to your states, filter them, alphabetize the states, and start getting rid of states that you don't want to invest in. Now, I always tell investors, start with 3 to 5 states. Okay. Now, I'm going to give Darlene and Lisa an example here. Darlene and Lisa are from Michigan. Actually, Darlene lives down now in Florida. Well, guess what? Then the first 2 states you should be looking at stuff is what? Michigan and Florida. The next state I would look at, it would be Ohio. Okay. Because if you're going to do a non-judicial state like Michigan, that's great. Everybody loves non-judicial states. I wouldn't just be buying in non-judicial states. I would look at also judicial states as well. Florida is a judicial state. It's got a little longer foreclosure time frame, but the values are obviously higher than Florida, and values are still maintaining in Florida, and there's still people moving to Florida even with the insurance costs. If you can find insurance, great. If you can't, you might want to avoid it. But Michigan is going to have plenty of assets to take a look at, and that's what I want you to think about. What are the states that I can look at that I'm seeing inventory in? That New York, New Jersey excluded, unless you live there and you got your own attorneys in New York and New Jersey. Like I've got a few students, you probably don't want to waste your time there. Okay, but Ohio, Michigan, great states, you see plenty of inventory. Missouri, where Jessica lives, you're going to see some stuff there. Next door in Kansas, you're going to see some stuff there in Kansas. Kansas is a 12-month judicial foreclosure process. Missouri is 90 days, something like that. I would look at Indiana. Indiana is kind of like about in the middle, about a 9-month process to foreclose. Illinois, people always ask me about Illinois, and I'm not a fan of Illinois, especially in Cook County, around the Chicago area. It can take you a while to foreclose in Illinois, but when you get all the red tape and the dragging out, I'll look at other counties besides Cook. But if it's in Cook County, I'm going to kill it off. Okay. And like I said before, I won't look at anything in Kentucky. Louisiana, I'll look at if it's like New Orleans or Baton Rouge or Lake Charles or where they're major areas. And that's the next thing you want to look at. Okay. You're going to get these states and stuff like that. If you recognize the city, guess what? Yay. If you don't know where the hell that city is, take a look at it. And if it's out in the middle of nowhere, out in the sticks, okay, you don't want to be buying stuff that's rural for the most part, unless you're looking for like land that you can go hunting on or something like that, or you're fine. It goes back to that first rule: never buy something you don't want to end up owning. I was looking at a portfolio stuff a year ago. There was a property in Michigan, south of Jackson, Michigan, out in the woods, but it was like 120 acres with a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house on it with a 10-acre pond. I was like, that might not be too bad if it wasn't so freaking cold out there. I would look at that. All right. So that's the thing. If it's rural and outside of town, where it says rural route 1 or something like that, or farm to market road, you probably don't want to. And now, don't get me wrong, there's a lot of farms throughout Kansas and Missouri and Minnesota, a lot of cornfields in Iowa. You're going to see that. That's okay. If you're fine, that's fine. You can, that if that's in your buy box, that's okay. But you got to know what your buy box is. I'm glad that's why I brought that up, because you're going to have asset managers ask you, what are you looking to buy? Now, what's my buy box? My buy box is I buy basically assets anywhere from 50,000 to up to $1 million. These are single family homes. I'll look at. I prefer $500,000 and less in most cases, but I'll look at stuff in most of the major markets that's at least 6 months or longer in distress. I'll look at reperforming stuff, but I got to have at least a year of reperforming for me to buy. I don't really like low balance stuff, anything that's got low balance. And this is where you go back to your spreadsheet. And as people start asking you, or as you're getting these spreadsheets in, where you start eliminating things. Okay. Now, I say this with a grain of salt. Now, if you're using your own funds, your own money, your own IRA accounts, and you find something you're happy with it, you're happy with the return, and it's going to return to you with your own funds, by all means, then buy it. Totally fine to buy it. Whether it's a big balance or it's a small balance, if you're happy buying that asset and it's going to make you whatever your return is happy with, 6, 8, 10, 12, whatever beyond, whatever it might be. Okay. That's totally fine. If you're happy with that asset and where it's located, like I grew up in South Texas down by Corpus Christi in a small town that originally had like 4,000 people. That's really too small for most people. But since I grew up there, I have friends there. I know that area there. My mom still lives down there. I would do that. Okay. I would buy. I'm comfortable with that. Not everybody else is. You get what I'm saying? So that's the thing. Try to stick to your major markets. I prefer cities that have at least 50,000 people or greater. So that would be one of the things that you might do. If you're comfortable buying in Michigan, Ohio, then what you could do is go to Google and say, hey, what are cities, or go to ChatGPT, what are cities in Michigan or Ohio that have a population of 50,000 people or more? And it'll spit out a list. Well, there's your list. There's the cities that you'll buy in. Okay. For the most part, you get what I'm saying? And you start getting smaller than that. The reason we avoid smaller cities for the most part, because it's less people there to buy, less realtors, less rehabbers. It just becomes more expensive for you to buy from rural. A few years ago, a couple students of mine thought they were going to be smart and buy a bunch of these low balance properties that were these like vacant REOs. They were going to go rehab them, and then they're going to offer them on terms and owner financing. I said, I love the idea. I hate the actual asset. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, listen, there's a reason these assets have issues. There's nobody out there to go. Nobody wants to drive an hour out of town to go knock on a door. Nobody wants to rehab that property. I mean, even you have that around bigger cities. Like this happened in Flint a few years ago. People didn't want to rehab properties in Flint. They wanted to go to Detroit to rehab. So it cost you twice as much to get somebody to come out to rehab your property in Flint. Now I bought in Flint. I own stuff in Flint. It's not a bad city. Forget the water. Just don't drink the water, okay? But I'm not drinking the water there. Other people are. You get what I'm saying? So that goes back to the thing. Start running. If, like I said, it's to make it easy. If you start cutting your list down and there's nothing left on that list because the population is too low, guess what? There will be more that come along. All right. Don't feel like this one list or this list you're looking at is the only. I got to make an offer. I got to make a deal happen. You start thinking that way, you're gonna get in trouble. Can we agree to that? Can I get an amen from anybody that's watching on this that they understand that? Yes, thumbs up. Yes, good. All right. So you eliminate small cities, you eliminate rural cities. Then you're going to be looking at other things on the spreadsheet that help you identify the opportunities. Now, one of my favorite things to eliminate is I look at the monthly P&I payment. All right. Now, remember, if you're using your own funds and you're happy with $100 a month payment coming in off of a small balance note and you're buying it cheap enough and you're getting a good yield, kudos, good for you. That's fine. You can buy it. But what you have to realize is that there are servicing costs. There's going to be monthly servicing costs that are going to be taken out of that monthly payment. Okay. So if it's a performing note, you may only see a $15 to $30, charge each month. And that's fine. Okay. If you're fine with that, you're making $70 now. Great. 7 times 12 is 840. Hopefully you're buying that cheap. Okay. To get that. But that's just to you. Now, if you've got an investor, you now have to pay on top of that. Then you're not doing very well. Then you're not making money at all. You may potentially losing money on that. So I look at anything that's below $250 a month. I just go ahead and get rid of it, whether it's performing or non-performing, because we're going to be using other people's money most of the time. Now, I'll make the exception every once in a while for something we're buying with our own IRA money and stuff like that. Different story. But if I'm using OPM or got an investor who's going to fund the deal, I'm not going to put them into something like that because it's hard to make money when you're barely making $200 a month on a deal. It just becomes more of a pain in the ass to take that deal down. Now, there's going to be times that if you're buying in bulk or you're buying a portfolio, you got to take it all. Okay. On those low balance stuff like that, you basically reduce your bid so much that it can make money for you. But most of the time, if you can just cherry pick or you get low level pricing, just avoid those. I had a couple of deals down in the Valley. They were low balance assets on assets that were worth about 100 each. And when I got in the BPOs, the exterior drive-bys that my realtor did and showed me the comps, I was happy with the comps. But the actual photos of the properties were in worse condition than the actual property was online when I looked at it originally. Like the grass was tall, the paint was peeling, it looked like a lot rougher house. And I started doing a little deeper dive. It was a couple elderly folks that lived in this property. I'm like, I don't want to foreclose. I really can't imagine anything I have to rehab in this property is probably not going to make sense, and I don't want to get in that rehab in these rougher areas. So I said no to those. Okay. And that's the thing. Your due diligence is going to help protect you. The money you pay for an exterior BPO, and then ordering a title report or an O&E report. The person that we love working with is Dickie Baldwin at baldwinadvisorygroup.com. They're a great company, very quick turnaround time most of the times. And that's another thing. If you have a rural asset, it may take a longer time to get due diligence back because some of these small counties just don't have the staff to pull stuff. Okay. So once again, get rid of rural properties, get rid of low P&I, monthly P&I payments, really below 250 a month or less. It just doesn't make any sense. And I honestly, the more you get into this, the more that number is going to go up some. You may go to 300. You may go, I got to see $400 a month. It just depends on where you're looking to buy, obviously. Okay. If you saw a $400 a month payment in Florida or like down in Miami, it's going to be like a rat hole. You know what I mean? Not going to be a nice property for the most part. So low monthly payment. And then you're going to look at your balances. You have the unpaid principal balance. And if they have it, the legal payoff amount, estimated legal payoff, I get rid of low numbers on that. Really, anything below 25,000 in those, I'm going to get rid of. Like I said, that's my decision. I'm also going to look at the terms of the mortgage. Anything below really 10 months of payments. If they have less than 10 months of payments, really less than 12 is probably a better thing. Because most of the stuff you're going to be looking at 30-year mortgages. Okay. If they've got really less than 15 years, it doesn't make a lot of sense because they're paying down too much principal. The interest is going to be a harder time holding on to that note for 3 years if you're taking care of your investor. Okay. So low terms left, I'll get rid of that. Now, the exception to that, and I meant to bring this up there, you may see hard money loans that are only like a 12-month period. As long as you're buying those hard money loans at a price and you're happy making that return for 6 or 12 months till you get paid back, that's a different story. Okay. But your 30-year mortgages, I want to see at least 15 years of payments left. I prefer in the mid-20s, actually, more so than anything else. Okay. What I don't like buying now, too, and this affects the P&I payment, is I don't want to buy 40, 50-year mortgages. All right. I don't want to buy that because the payment becomes so small in a lot of cases and drag it all out. It just doesn't make. I like 30-year mortgages, preferably. I'll look at a 15, but a 15 needs to have at least probably 12 years of interest payments still left available to it. Okay. So get rid of low UPB, low terms, or low months left, I guess you could say is a more accurate thing. Then look at your values. Now, how are you going to pull values on the front end without ordering BPOs? You're just going to run with Zillow. Most of these sellers are going to put a valuation on it. And honestly, 90% of the time, they're just going to do a Zillow estimate. Okay. Now, they may have pulled a BPO. They may have paid for some realtors to pull comps. I'll throw that in there. That's fine. But that number we know can be varied a little bit. We know that, like, if we go back to that spring property, hey, online Zillow, so this property is worth 250. Well, and realistically, it's worth 50 because of the condition of the report. You got to realize Zillow values, Trulia values, that's like an AVM model, an automated valuation model. They're going to be taking off what's sold, and most of the stuff that's sold, as you look at it, is probably going to be pretty decent properties for you. Okay. So now they get your spreadsheet. You've eliminated a lot of stuff already. You got rid of stuff that's in New York, New Jersey. You've got rid of stuff that low mortgage payments below 250. You got rid of anything really below a UPB, unpaid principal balance of 25,000. When you look at your values, really anything below, I'd say get rid of below anything 25. When you're starting off, you're probably going to bump that up to 50,000 the more experience you get. I want to see some assets with some values, especially these days. The values have come back. Great. All right. Now, not every city is seeing appreciation growth, but some is staying pretty flat for the most part. Okay. Now, then what do you want to look at? Well, then look at we talked about you only want to own something, buy something you want to end up owning. Then looking at the type of the property type. Okay. I like single family homes. I like condos. I don't care if it's a PUD, or it's a townhome. Those things don't bother me. What I don't want to own really is vacant land right now. Now, I'll look at vacant land differently for my own investment, not for a note investment aspect of stuff. Okay. But you can buy land notes. You can buy land notes all day long. There's people that sell land notes all day long. Just be careful of the values and make sure that the terms and everything look good for you. Okay. But I don't want stuff that's basically, I don't really want a mobile home on a lot. Okay. I will look at that stuff. I have bought some of that stuff depending on where it's at, but you got to be very particular about where you're buying mobile homes. Now, there's some great folks that love mobile home notes, like Montrese Walters, one of our students. There's a bunch of other folks that like that. That's totally fine. That's not my cup of tea. I don't want to take that stuff back to rent it. It's also got to be attached. If I'm going to buy something like that, I got to give my buddy Cal a big shout. He's got 3 that have been originated a couple years ago. They're on time. He's buying them at like 70, somewhere between 70 and 80 cents a dollar. They're going to be great little investments for him. Well, when I say mobile homes, I mean manufactured homes as well, Lorelei, for the most part. Now, I'm not talking like stuff that's in the middle of a neighborhood. Okay, if it's like in a RV park, I'll take a look at that. If I'm talking stuff that's way out in the boonies. It's outside of town. It's in a ratty ass mobile home park that looks ratty ass. Okay, you get what I'm saying? I don't want that. I want something that looks nice that I can move, that I would be proud to own. All right. That's the big thing on that. And I'll look at it. And a lot of times when you eliminate the small cities and start eliminating small cities, a lot of stuff goes away. Okay. Because there's usually zoning in most of the cities that won't allow for mobile homes to be downtown in the middle of, a development. You get what I'm saying? Right. Those are things I'm getting rid of. I'm literally just like slicing and dicing, deleting off. Another thing that you can run due diligence for is check your rent rates. Okay. And every city has a little bit of different rent rate, from the cream of the crop down to the crap. Okay. You might be able to rent a property, but if you've got to go in with 2 guns blazing to collect your rent, it's probably not a deal, right? And so know what your cities, and that's part of the thing that you want to look at when you start looking at the cities is, okay, what's the median rent rate? What's the average rent rate of those cities? And that'll tell you, okay, am I on the upper side or the lower side of the rent? If median rent rate's $1,500 and this one says it rents for $1,000, that's below the median. Is this in a rougher area? What's the crime look like? That kind of stuff. Okay, like I'll give you an example, like Michigan, specifically around Detroit, Wayne County. A few years back, I would look at stuff that would be $500 and above. Okay, same thing, Columbus, Ohio. I got a couple buddies there. They were like, "Oh, anything we can rent for $500. If it's below $500, it's a rough neighborhood." Okay, of course that number's gone up now as Columbus got better. It's gone up in Detroit. It's gone up everywhere. So you got to know what your median rent rates are. So that's the thing to get rid of stuff. Get rid of it if it's low value rent. It just doesn't make any sense, and you really don't want to be in Class D as a note investor. Now, that's not saying you're going to rent it. Okay, I'm not saying, but if you do have to take it back, it means it's probably in a rough spot. That's part of due diligence. Okay, so let's kind of talk about this as I keep kind of going back in here. So looking at the states you don't want in, the rural cities, the low P&I payment, the low UPB, low values, those are all things you're getting rid of, and then looking at like a rent rates and getting rid of those that are low rent, and also property types. Keep your single families. Now, the next question that people often ask me, well, what about vacant versus occupied or unknown? And you'll see that on a lot of spreadsheets where it says occupied, owner occupied, or occupied unknown, means there may be a tenant in place there. Or if it just says unknown, they don't know if it's occupied or vacant. Okay, so here's the thing. In Texas and Florida, this is my buying stuff. I will look at vacant assets in those 2 states. Okay. I'll look at a little bit if I see other cities that I own stuff in currently. Right. But for the most part, a vacant asset isn't going to be something that you're going to get back on track. That strategy for a vacant asset, 9.5 times out of 10, is when you foreclose. If you can foreclose, great. Or if you can get a deed in lieu, that's great. But you're probably going to have to foreclose most of the time. Then guess what? You have an REO. You're basically buying that note to foreclose, fix it up, and sell it. So only buy vacant assets in areas that you're familiar with, or you've got friends, or you already have stuff in. Okay. Because when you buy a note, you don't have to wait to foreclose to go in and weatherize it. You can go over the minute you close on that note. If the locks aren't changed, as long as it's vacant, you can go over, change the locks, take a realtor over, take pictures, as long as it's vacant. Don't be like a couple guys a few years back. They bought a note. They searched online. They said it was vacant. They called the city, but they called on the wrong address. It was like 696 Davis Drive. Well, they called on 696, and it was Davis Circle. So they showed up to the wrong house, changed the locks. There's this house full of stuff. They pulled up a moving truck and were hauling stuff out. And guess what happened? The cops showed up and the homeowner showed up as they're moving stuff out. Oh, somebody's going to jail. Well, it was a mistake. It was an honest mistake. They ended up paying that homeowner quite a bit of money to avoid that, to apologize. But you got to make sure you're looking at the right asset, okay? That takes us to kind of online values or online viewership. And you look at this stuff too. I mean, the reason we didn't start off by looking at the condition of the online photos first is you can often get rid of a lot of the junk by just looking at the spreadsheet. Look at what it says, okay? Look at that stuff. It's going to save you a lot of time. And that way, then after you kind of cut down your list to where you're, okay, I'm comfortable with the payments, comfortable with the where they're located, the asset type, the UPBs, the values, then we look at what the online condition report looks like. And that's jumping on Zillow, doing some Google Map views. There are things that you look for in Google Maps, okay? They want to take this down a little bit. Obviously, you're looking over aerials. What does it look like? Does it have a roof? Does it have a blue tarp on the top? There's never a good sign when there's a blue tarp on the roof, okay? It means you need to replace the roof, okay? Water damage, that kind of stuff. But look at the date of when that photo was taken, that drive-by was taken. If it's this year, like, well, it's 2024 now as we do this, right? So if it's something from the later part of 2023, it's less than 6 months old and the house looks good and there's a car in the driveway, the yard's mowed, there's some pride of ownership with landscaping or plants or wind chimes or whirligigs or kids' toys out in the front yard, I'm cool with that, especially if I'm buying that note. If the value is at 200 and I'm buying that note at 100, I'm not going to spend a lot of time like, okay, I'm pretty comfortable with that valuation, right? Okay. But if I have an older photo, and maybe it's 2-year-old photo, I'm going to make sure and still pay for a BPO, somebody to drive by and make sure pull current comps, current numbers on it. But if it's current photos, like I said, last 90 days and looks good in pristine condition, I'm pretty good, especially if it's occupied. I'm okay with that. I don't really worry, get so bogged down on the valuation of that stuff. Okay. But if it's vacant and it doesn't look good from a year or two ago, it's probably not going to look any better. It's probably going to look worse. Okay. The one exception of this would be like contract for deeds. Contract for deeds may have been an ugly property where somebody went in, rehabbed the property, offered boner financing for a period of time to folks, and you had people come in, fix the property up. So when you're looking at a contract for deed tape, what's great about it is if you're doing the Zillow search, if it was a contract for deed, the deed transferred hands from either the bank or the land institution to the investor now who own or finance the property to an end buyer, right? But the deed doesn't change names yet. It still may be ABC Investments, but it's John Smith living in it who took a contract for deed out from ABC Investments. So you can see when it's sold, and we know a lot of times Zillow will show a sold price affects their value. So look at when the date that was sold. Okay. If the date was sold and then you look at your spreadsheet and the origination date is after the date on the photo, okay, it tells a story. Somebody bought this house, they went in and fixed it up, an owner financed it, or they decided to finance it somebody else because the old photo is before this note was originated. Okay, we need to send somebody out to take a look at it. Okay. But if the photo is 2022 and the loan was originated in like 2020 and you got boarded up windows and cracked glass and ugliness, it ain't getting any better. Okay. One of the jokes that we used to run in our mastermind groups is if it had a big overgrown tree where you couldn't see the house or overturned weeds, you might as well just killed it. And that was a pretty honest case. Okay. So that's the thing. Look at the properties. Don't fall in love with it. Don't run into we always call it the OTSC syndrome. Oh, that's so cute. Because you don't own the asset. Now, you don't buy anything you want to end up owning, but you don't really own the asset. You're the bank. Now you're excited. Hey, I'll buy that note because that borrower's got a lot of emotional equity. They got a flag out in their front porch. Great stuff. We'll definitely work to keep that and keep that borrower in place. Now, that's how you kind of go through that stuff. Now, I like to use batchgeo.com to map a lot of these at once, and then I can go through them individually and take a look. You could hire a VA to do the things we just talked about and have them knock this all out in roughly just a few minutes, and then go and pull values of the assets, and also pull street views images and save it on a spreadsheet or save it in a Dropbox folder so you can take a look at that and see what the condition report is. And tell them, hey, if it looks trashed out, now don't get me wrong, a trashed out property here might look like a kingdom, a castle somewhere else in the world. You get what I'm saying? So I still like to look at the assets, but I'm not going to sit here and spend a lot of time looking at, because it's initial due diligence. This is not spend a lot of time and a lot of money because you don't know if your bid's going to be accepted. And that takes us back. Once you narrow down a list, you're going to run some numbers on your spreadsheet, insert some columns, run some formulas. And the basic things that I do, I'm not going to get into formula creation. If you've been through the workshop, we give you some formula slides, we go through that stuff. But you got to look at, and this is why I go back to, what is the bid? What type of bid are they looking for? Okay. When they give you a bid, like I want 70 cents on the dollar of UPB, guess what? One of the first things I do is insert a column in my spreadsheet and say, okay, what's 70 cents on the dollar of UPB? If it's non-performing, I then add a column and say, okay, I'll take 12 months times the P&I payment, the principal and interest payment. And what is that number? Well, what can I get if the borrower just starts to reinstate the loan the first 12 months? I'll put that in a column. I'll then also insert a column next to it and say 16 months P&I, because I'm going to ask that borrower to bring some skin in the game, at least 4 months of payments, especially if they're over a year behind, to the table. And so that's 16 months. So now I got two basic columns. I got, okay, what's my bid? Now I can take my 12 months P&I payment, whatever that number is, now add a fourth column, and I label it 12-month mod. So it's simple, okay? 12-month P&I divided by what your bid to see what kind of yield it is. I'll do that all the way down, and I'll do the same thing for 16-month mod, and then run that all the way down there. Now, Lorelei asked me the question, how do you price bankruptcy assets? Now, are there in current bankruptcy right now? That's the question. If it's an old bankruptcy filing from a couple of years ago and a discharge, it's not, you don't worry about this. You price it as a non-performing note, it's a non-performing note. It's a current bankruptcy loan. Most of those loans, they want to sell them, if it's currently a BK Chapter 13 in payments, they're probably going to want 80 cents on the dollar for that. They would treat it as a performing note because they've got a court order. I don't do that. That's great. And if that number makes sense to you based on what the payment is and what the was owed, okay, that if that yield is good, great. But oftentimes, if they want 80, 90 cents a down payment, it just doesn't make any sense to buy that stuff. Okay. So you have to look at the asset individually. When was the bankruptcy? Is it still in effect? And then that's an extra layer of due diligence that you need to do, Lorelei, and looking at the pacer.gov loans. Okay. By the way, did you ever get a response back from the seller on that tape that you had on if they had their final pricing? Because I know he pulled that tape. The seller pulled that tape. Well, have you followed up with him more than once? Okay, so that's what I get at. Here's one of the best things you can learn. Don't follow up with somebody only once. You got to follow up. You got to realize, ladies and gentlemen, 80% of sales are made after the fifth contact. Okay, if you've only followed up with once, you still got 4 more times to go. All right. And here's the thing that I'm a big believer in. I'm not bothering somebody. They want to sell those lists off. Maybe they've been busy. Maybe they had something come up. Maybe they missed your email. Okay. So follow up with an email, follow up with a phone call, follow up with a text message. I mean, I'm literally stalking these people until they tell me, no, F off, Scott Carson. We don't want to talk to you anymore. Okay. Just put it. Yes. And Lorelei, thank you for saying that. And here's the number one thing I get that from people. Oh, thanks. I thought I was bothering them. You're not bothering them. People are busy. You are not their only thing they think about. Okay. Now, if you called them like every hour, on the hour, text them on the hour where you were like a psycho girlfriend, psycho boyfriend, you would be bothering them. Okay. But if you call them like once every 2 days, hey, just fall back up. I'll give you a great example. Like Larry Hoffman, one of his funds that sends him stuff all the time now. It took him like 8 weeks of calls. It took him 6 weeks to get in the right department. Then it took like another 8 weeks of following up with it before the asset manager finally sent him a tape. Now he gets a tape all the time. So don't ever apologize. They got notes to sell. They're trying to sell them. Follow up. Okay. I Talked about that on the first week. Just follow up, continuously follow up. Once a month at least, once every week. If they got something, you know there's a nibble on there, they got a list, follow up with them weekly, once or twice a week. Just follow up, seriously, till they tell you don't call them anymore. You're not bothering them. Okay, don't take no for an answer. That's part of how you get ahead in this industry, is not taking no and making multiple offers. Okay, because you got some options. I'm not picking on you. It's one thing. I'm glad you brought it, because everybody needs to hear that. The minute you start thinking, well, I'm sure I'm bothering them, that's where you've got to pull out the gun and shoot that thought. Okay, no, I'm not bothering them. They got stuff to sell. I'm a buyer, or I've got buyers that I can wholesale these to. Let me reach out to them. Okay. So anyway, going back to your spreadsheet, you've entered a column in for 12 months payments, 16 months payments. If you run your calculation of what kind of reinstatement modification we get if the bar started making 12 months, by taking 12 months P&I, dividing that by what the bid price is, what they're looking for, that will give you a yield, an interest rate. That's your yield roughly. Same thing for 16 months. Divide that by what your bid is. What's that number look like? Those are rough numbers. I'm not going to sit here and run everything through an ROI calculator, figuring every expense in the book right off the bat. I'm just figuring a high end, because on those two calculations, especially 16 months, I'm going to want that yield to probably be, and we're talking non-performing. This is strictly non-performing right now, because if it's performing, you're not going to get 16 months. You're going to get just 12 months. The non-performing side, I'm probably going to, well, not probably, I want to see roughly about a 20% yield. Okay, we're 16 months of payments divided by what my bid price is. I need it to be roughly a 20% yield. Now, here's the thing. We've had historically low interest rates the last couple of years, right? Not the last 12 months, but before that, we had 2-3 years of really low. You're not going to buy a lot of stuff at a 2%, 3% interest rate, and those numbers make sense. Okay, they're just too low an interest rate, and you're going to have to get a bigger discount, let's say 70 cents on the dollar. Okay, so don't be surprised if you're looking at and you run those numbers and the interest rate comes out like a single-digit number. Like, what's it? Well, that's where you go look at the interest rate. If the interest rate's at 4%, well, if you're buying at 70, you're only getting technically a 30% bump. So you're basically seeing about a 4.23 yield. That doesn't make a lot of sense. You get what I'm saying, ladies and gentlemen? So anyway, run your formulas on that. And then what I also like to do is let me see what's the value, put my value in there. What's 90% of my value? Because figuring if I had to sell it fast or pay closing costs and commissions, I'm going to take 90% of the value minus my purchase price, and then I usually add a flat 5,000 on top of the purchase price. So if I'm buying at 70, I'm basically 90 cents of value minus my $75,000 bid. Okay. Now, here's the big thing. That's if there's underwater assets. The value is 90 and they owe 120 and you're buying at 70% of value. Okay, great. But if there's equity, let's flip this number around. They probably are going to want like 80 cents of the dollar if there's equity. So run the same formulas at 80%, and that should tell you roughly what it is. If you're using your own money and you're happy making the yields on that, bid away. If you're using other people's money, you have to think about what you're going to pay your investors. Okay. If your investors are going to be at a 6, 7, 8, 10% interest to them, because that's what you're working on to, then you're going to need to see if you're paying somebody 10%, then you want to get 10% yourself. You got to see a 20% return. If you're paying somebody an 8%, and you want to get at least an 8%, then you see a 16% return. Okay. Well, that's still a great day. And that's just off the payments. Now, if you foreclose, then you figure out what's your yield on that, on the foreclosure. And this is why we like to buy pretty assets. If we know we're going to have to do a little paint carpet. That's not too difficult at all. Okay. And appliances. But that's the big thing about it. That's why you buy pretty assets. So it doesn't need a lot of work on the inside. If you're buying a vacant asset, it's going to need a lot of work. And you're often going to have to replace the electrical, the plumbing, the roof, the foundation, something in that house, if not multiple things, to make it work for you. And it just doesn't make sense in a lot of cases, especially something like that. You're going to be paying a whole lot less. Okay. So don't be surprised if you run your numbers. There's only a few on there that make sense for you. That's kind of normal. That's normal. Make some offers. You're just pulling online values. I would always call and check taxes owed. This is one of the most important things you do. Get on Netra online, public records, call the taxing authority, see what's owed in back taxes, and then figure out what back taxes are into your bid. If there's $70,000, is what your bid would normally be, but you find out that's $5,000 in back taxes owed, then deduct that from your bid. Say, okay, 65. This includes that there's $5,000 in back taxes owed that need to be paid. Because otherwise, the seller is going to be nitpicky about it and say, well, you could have checked the taxes beforehand, and that would have been something on your bid in the front end. There's people that do that all the time, and I just want to slap them, because like not everybody's going to look at taxes off the bat. You should, and it's one thing we do. But what I'm trying to get at, ladies and gentlemen, is check it. It's worth doing. If you can't find a number of, pick up and call the county before you submit your bid. Now, if you're getting last minute, you may want to submit your bid with some stars. And we're not saying what do you call that when you submit an offer on a property and you've got conditions, stipulations or whatever, like your bid. Like if somebody sends me a tape and I got to get a bid in by tomorrow and it's like 100 assets, I'll run my numbers, say, listen, I don't have time to check the taxes. Here's my bid minus taxes owed, or here's my bid, and I'm gonna say I haven't checked taxes, so I'm gonna fade my bid by any amount of taxes are owed, because I don't know. I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and waste my time looking at 100 assets if I can't. Doesn't make any sense. Why waste it? All that time. Now you're gonna hire somebody to do that, but still paying somebody to do that. It's still easier for you to do that. So this is why we wait for the taxes till you've narrowed down the list to really your final 10% of the tape and go from there. Okay. Contingency. Thank you, Lisa. Hey, how's it going today, Lisa? Your contingencies on the contract. But here's the thing: when you're sending a spreadsheet, and how do you make your bids? Attach the spreadsheet. If you're submitting on one bid, one asset, then you could copy paste what the loan number is and the address and your number. Don't copy the whole thing like 40 cell wide and insert that into the email, because it's going to shrink it down so low, the asset manager is going to have to get out magnifying glass or the Hubble telescope to try to read it. Just send the spreadsheet along, eliminate everything else off the spreadsheet but the 2, 3, or 4 assets that you're bidding on, and insert a column on the very far left side, highlight it and label it my bids, or Lisa's bids, or Jessica's bids, or WCN bids. When we put that number on there, and that's how we send it in a spreadsheet. Attached, not inserted. Okay. All right. If it's an individual asset, it's one tape, you could always respond back with an email and say, hey, I'll offer you $55,000 for this one with this loan number. It's simple like that. But if you're looking at a bigger tape, get in the habit of attaching the tape back to it, not inserting it, but only if if there's 200 assets, that's only bidding on 3 or 4, then just send them back. Because the reason it's most important to attach a spreadsheet, you want to make it simple for the broker or the seller to be able to copy paste over your bids and put them into his master spreadsheet, or his or her master spreadsheet, because they're going to get bids from 5, 10, 20 people. And you want to make it as easy as possible for them to take your bid and put it in their spreadsheet as either the highest or the second offer. Okay. And that's the thing, looking at that stuff, going through that stuff. We've got a longer due diligence sheet that if you've attended our workshop, you got a copy of it. I'm not going to go through it tonight, because if you guys attended the workshop, you've gotten that, or you've gotten it from me from being in the WCN crew or stuff like that. Let me just share a little bit so you can kind of see what's all involved with it. This is actually kind of start to finish, the evaluation tapes, filter, going through that, determine values, get rid of equity deals, look at your last payments, kind of the simple stair-step method. If there's negative equity, kind of bid off of, price it, and it gets into your due diligence aspect of when you order a BPO and ONE, never order anything you're going to pay for in due diligence. Never order it until you've got an accepted offer back. And I prefer to have it under contract and then send a contract out to you, okay? Look at your insurance, look at your collateral files. We're not going to get into that tonight. There's other things you can do for that. Your servicing company and legal stuff to look at. Check the notes. Look at the last dates that the bars reached out to the homeowner, or the bank, I mean. There's a lot more stuff to go there. What to look for, the collateral files, and then also obviously the property, stuff like that. But there's more stuff to look at versus just pulling the property value and looking at that stuff. You've got to run those numbers, but it's the first part of it is the due diligence. And like I said, you got to know what you're buying. If you're going to tape in, it's the stuff that just doesn't make any sense, you're not buying this stuff. And that's okay to go back to the seller and say, hey, I appreciate you sending this, but this is just not what I'm buying. This is not in my buy box. Okay. I'm not buying anything in New York or New Jersey. So I appreciate you sending it over to me and going from there. Now, somebody asked me that, what about reverse mortgages? Okay. Now, reverse mortgages, if you know what they are, they're basically the borrowers in most reverse mortgages have deceased. Once we get them on the note side, the borrower's passed away. Okay. And it's the heirs that have the opportunity to either pay off the mortgage or the bank forecloses. Now we're buying those oftentimes. There may be equity. And sometimes they want 90 cents on the dollar because there's all this equity. Well, I'm not going to pay for that, right? So reverse mortgages are strictly a buy that note, foreclose, rehab, turn into rental, or rehab and sell, and make sure you get it the right price. Now I've looked at reverse mortgages. If it's here in Texas, within a 2-hour pace, I'll literally get in my truck and go out and drive by them and take a look at it. Because oftentimes you can get interior access, and that's a great thing to look at a vacant asset and see if it makes sense. Some of them made sense, others haven't made sense. So, but that's what I want to go through. Know your buy box and know how to really cut down that list to take a look at things. All right. And looking to one thing I forgot to mention, I was talking with a student about this earlier. He's looking at an asset in Maine. Besides it being freaking cold, like the frozen tundra of the United States, but Maine, okay, freaking Stephen King country, as we like to say. Look at the last payment date, because what's going to happen to is a lot of lenders are putting like estimated legal balance. Well, the estimated legal balance or payoff balance is going to be the unpaid balance plus how many payments haven't been made, been added to that amount, plus late fees, okay? But every state has a statute of limitations when it comes to mortgage debt. So when we looked at this asset that Cal was looking at earlier tonight, Cal's one of my coaching students, he was getting at a pretty decent price. The value was there, okay? The legal balance was at like 220. The house is supposedly worth, based on line was at 275. And they wanted, what do they want? He made his offer at, I'm trying to remember. Can't remember exactly what it was, but it was at 70 cents on the dollar of payoff balance, okay? But the thing that popped up is that the UPB was only 90. The legal balance was like 220. So there's $130,000 in back payments and late fees. I'm like, when was the last payment made? And he looked over 2014, literally like January 2014. So it was 10 years of back payments on there, added on there. I said, well, wait a second. Most states have a statute of limitations that limits the amount that the lender can go in collecting on late fees. And so with Maine, the statute of limitations is only 6 years, not 10 years. So that would be my get out of jail card. I say, well, he bid on it. They've accepted his bid. I'm like, well, I would go back and say, I'm not going to close on this one because the payoff balance that is enforceable is not 220. You've got to take 4 years of payments off, the 4 plus late fees. So it's only the last 6 years. So your legal balance that is enforceable, I don't know what it was, but it's significantly less than the 220, which means Cal's bid needs to come down significantly as well. Okay. So look at that. Now, some states, if a borrower's made one payment of $1, it restarts the statute of limitations. But if they had done that, it would show the last payment made would have been sometime a whole lot sooner than 10 years ago. So look at the statute of limitations. Each state's different. You're going to have to Google that. You can usually find that stuff pretty easy by just what's the statute of limitation for Arizona? What's the statute of limitations for Michigan for mortgage debt? And it tells you, just realize anything beyond that period, you're basically going to say, see you later. That you're not going to be able to collect on that most of the time. And when something like this would be more of a foreclosure anyway. But it's important because you can only foreclose on the enforceable amount that you're due. Now, if the property's vacant and the borrower's moved on, yeah, could you go ahead and foreclose on the full amount if you want to take the property back because nobody's going to contest it? Yeah, you could do that. You could totally do that. But if it gets contested, it could be thrown out, or you're going to have to go back to square one. And in Maine, it's a 2-year foreclosure process. So I was like, have they started the foreclosure process on this one? He's like, yeah, they're like a year into it. I'm like, well, okay, is it occupied or vacant? He goes, I don't know. I said, well, it's vacant. How long has it been vacant for? How much in taxes are? He goes, I don't know the tax. I said, well, you better call and find out how long it's been vacant for, because we've had some extreme winters, and Maine is damn cold up there, and you don't want the ghost of some bar from behind to show up on it. Okay. So that's one thing to look at, to watch out for. We go on and on into the due diligence aspect of it. But these are the things I get the most amount of questions about. When I get a tape in, what am I looking? Is it a tape or a dud? These are the things to look for. I do encourage, if you're watching this, catching the replay on this, listening to this, we do have our one-day note class, note weekend. We host that the third Saturday of the month. As we're recording this, we'll be having the note weekend this coming Saturday from 10 a.m. to probably around 2 o'clock. About a 4 to 5 hour class of me going through the basics of note investing, how to find, fund, and flip. And then, of course, we have our next 3-day class live, actually here in Austin, Texas, March 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. Cost for that is $997. That's good for you plus a spouse. If you're a coaching student, you can come for free. If you're a WCN career student, you can come. It's a reduced price. Just reach out to me and I'll give you a specific link for that. But it's significantly less than the $997. I'll tell you that. Okay. But anyway, guys, are there any questions, any concerns? Anybody want to ask something before we let you wrap up for the night? I just wanted to go through that tonight to help you. That first part is what really scares a lot of people. It's like they get a tape in, they get a spreadsheet in. What am I looking at? You get overwhelmed. I've seen realtors literally have like almost nervous breakdowns because they're like, everything's a deal. Not everything's a deal. Yes, there's a buyer for everything, but you're not a buyer for everything. Know what you want. Know the values that you're looking for. Know the areas, the states, the bigger cities. Those are going to make your life a whole lot easier. All right. Cookie cutter, when you can have it, you know you're buying, you know your buy box. It makes things a whole lot easier for you. If it doesn't fit into it, you kill it. Okay. And the same thing, like I'm not going to, $1 million note in Miami, it's kind of an average asset, right? We're told we're talking Miami, Florida, not Miami, Ohio, right? But $1 million asset in Akron might be LeBron James' house or something like that. That's going to stick out a little bit more. So know what's the values, the median values of your properties are area, in the cities and states, stuff like that. Cities specifically, not in source states, because it can be all across the board. But important to know that. Know your foreclosure timeframes. One of the best things that you can do when you're starting off is pick your 3 to 5 states that you're looking to buy in and reach out to foreclosure attorneys. You can go to legalleague100.com is a great website to find them. You can reach out to servicing companies that are servicing an area and ask them who they're using, ask other note investors who they're using as a servicer. Those are some things to do. And talk to that attorney. What's it take? What's the average foreclosure time frame? What's it going to cost me to foreclose on a note, on a contract for deed, and go from there. But keep it simple. Narrow down. You're not buying everything. If you're buying everything, the way I hear that and what other banks ask me, if you say you're buying everything, you're a buyer of nothing. You're a broker. We don't want that. So don't be afraid to reach out to me. You can always schedule a call with me by going to talkwithscottcarson.com. And then I also encourage you guys, check out our monthly membership by going to noteumbrella.com. It's $97 a month. Get you access to our training and class and stuff like that at a far significant cheaper price for you, and along with some weekly coaching calls and access to us. So any other questions, comments, concerns? Yes, you're going to need a bankruptcy attorney in that state separately from the foreclosure attorney to foreclose. So yes. Now, most of the time you're going to have the servicing company that's already is handling that. It already has an attorney lined up. So you just basically retain counsel and take on that attorney to help you out. Okay. Good question, Lorelei. All right. All right, everybody. Well, hey, go make some offers, make some phone calls. You don't need to know A to Z to get rock and rolling. This is part of why we're doing this. Finding deals, start to raising capital marketing, and start diving into the tapes to look what you're doing. Next week, we'll go into some of the strategies, the exits, and how to figure some of the case studies and how to make things happen, how to make some money in the note business. Will be our 4th week and final week in the implementation coaching for you. So if there's no any questions or comments, we'll let you get back to your day or your evening or your afternoon. Go out, make some offers, buddy, and we'll see you at the top. Thanks for joining us. Bye.